NSFW, forensic scientists of Reddit, what is the most WTF case that you ever had? Father-in-law is a cop. Years ago, he got called to a scene of a suicide by hanging. The body had been there for a while. Apparently the deceased had managed to do quite a bit of damage to his neck vertebrae, because his spine had snapped and his neck stretched down several feet from the nose. The cops at the scene took pictures of giraffe neck and passed them around the department. Somehow, my wife saw the pictures when she was at the tender age of 12, which screwed her up good enough to be a suitable mate for a guy like me. Not a forensic scientist, but a true story is good all the same. Officer I used to know was telling me of this kid's suicide. The parents had left for the day and the kid decided enough is enough. He grabbed his dad's shotgun and sat down on the sofa. With the shotgun in his mouth, he pulled the trigger. Blood, brain, and teeth covered the entire room and ceiling. The blast created a huge hole in the back of his head. Since the gun was in his mouth, he just sort of slid down the barrel. The parents come home and walk in to see their son sitting on the couch, shotgun in his mouth with the barrel protruding out of the back of his skull. A friend of mine is a forensic scientist and her department dealt with burglary cases only, usually generating pretty uninteresting stuff to tell people. But her only good story is that once she got a pair of gloves found at the crime scene. She went to examine them and felt that there was something hard inside. She turned the gloves up to get it out, and out falls a thumb, ripped off at the first joint. Apparently this particular burglar was holding up a safe while his mate went underneath it, dropped the safe on his hands, ripped his hands out and ran. They obviously caught the guy. Digital forensics. Drug dealers love taking photos of their girlfriends in their underwear. They also love taking photos of their stash. The genius is hardly ever turn of location services, so each photo is geotagged. Nothing too weird yet, but lem tell you. Every crime scene I've been to ducking splodge everywhere. Semen in the carpet, semen in the corpse, semen in the curtains, semen in the beard. Prof showed a case where a guy committed suicide by holding 2 forks on a table, then proceeded to headbang towards it, stuck both his eyes in. Attended a lecture by a pathologist once who asked us what household item someone had managed to kill themselves with, a toothbrush, a rubber band or a matchstick. He went on to tell us that a man had killed himself accidentally while trying to clean his ear out with a matchstick, punctured a blood vessel, painted a wall with his own blood, passed out and bled out on the sofa. This is a story from my fake uncle, a forensic officer who has leading a team of juniors in a suicide case. The victim of the suicide had filled a water pressure base fire extinguisher with explosive material. He didn't go into detail and hugged it like a teddy bear. Naturally, when he went off and out with a bang, he went all over the roof, walls and floor. My uncle proceeded to find a foot with all the tendons hanging out and paraded it in front of the juniors and pulled all the tendons, making the toes wiggle. His only regret was not finding a hand. Always fun around the most macabre of my father's friends. Not a crime scene guy. Used to be a first responder. Guy was sitting at a table, slumped over, with every single knife from a very nice knife set sticking out of his back, arranged just the way they were in the knife block. Wife was standing there, still yelling at him for dying too soon. Forensic chemist here, who occasionally gets called out to crime scenes just to consult on evidence collection. On the first one I ever went on, a father had shot his adult son and put the body in a deep freeze that was in his bedroom. There were a ton of cops and other people from our lab there, but when the coroner asked for help removing the body from the freezer, I volunteered quickly, as I had never been that close to a dead body, other than funerals, and was curious. As I helped the coroner lift the body out of the freezer, which still had a bunch of food in it too, a pack of frozen biscuits was stuck to his body. I had to pry them off of him, which was both very weird and kind of funny at the same time. A friend is a psychologist whose previous life was in crime scene photography. She went to the scene of a suicide in a garage. This guy had a project car that he had worked on his whole life. When he decided to end it all, he wanted to go with the car. So he shut the garage and turned on the engine and waited. To top it off, he had taken a bunch of pain and sleeping pills. When my friend got there, it was a good while after his death. EMTs and other specialists were there looking for details and whatnot. He was the VP of a fairly large chain of local businesses, so there was an insurance settlement to consider. My friend is in the middle of photographing the scene and the guy was laying there, pronounced dead hours ago, and he suddenly just shook hard. She thought it was a death rattle, so she kept taking pictures. Eventually the guy sat up and nodded and the EMTs were called back in to stabilize him and eventually save him. Apparently the car had run out of gas right at the moment he went out and he was pronounced dead on the scene. He couldn't talk or do much, but he had actually survived. Not a forensic scientist, surprise, but my mom knew a lady whose son committed suicide pretty brutally. While the parents were out, he got a shotgun from the gun cabinet, went to his room, and set it up with string and pulleys on a chair so that it would go off when the bedroom door was opened. He sat in the chair for what may have been hours. Parents get home. Mom goes to check on son. Bang. That poor woman needed some serious counseling. I can't imagine the guilt. And it was pretty itty of the kid to make one of his parents unwittingly do the dirty work for him. A man tried to abuse his wife, and when she fought back, he took her by the ears and smashed her head repeatedly on the corner of a table until her head became concave. When questioned by the police, he said he had found her lying down upon coming home, and gently shook her to see if she was awake. EMT here. We had a guy who was naked, bloodied, and tortured, then left outside in -10-degree weather until he froze. We found him literally frozen maybe a day after the fact. Now, my question is, how the hell do you move a 230-pound popsicle without breaking it? Edit. Words. My cousin in a coroner, and the worst was he came to get a body in a trailer. During the summer, man had been dead at least a week and had burst. He said the smell was the worst of his life. He and the other guy were up to their ankles in fluids and had to throw out his clothes and shoes. His boss felt so bad that he bought them each a new pair of like $300 shoes. A mate works at the hospital and his friend used to be the coroner, and one day he's like, come down and check this out. The guy had a middle-aged Australian Aboriginal lady lying on the slab dead as dead can be, and the coroner explains death was the result of a shotgun blast. It wasn't SSH but instead bird shot from an estimated 50 feet away, and he say to my mate find the pellet holes, so he's looking and finds 3 of them. One was in the leg, another in the neck, and another was in the abdomen. The last one in the abdomen was the pellet that killed her because it penetrated the liver anyway. The coroner said good on you, well done, but you missed one, there 4 pellet holes in this woman. So my mate's looking and eventually he gives up, so the coroner said look at the back of her hand. The last pellet hole was on the outside of her middle finger. She had been giving the finger to the person who shot her. From a family friend. People who do lots of yoga involving rolling their head around the axis of their neck. Over time it wears away the corners of the vertebrae, which is why you're not supposed to do it. He saw a few cases of people getting into relatively minor car crashes. What should have been a nasty case of whiplash instead becomes fatal as their spine was weakened and can't stop the momentum of their head. So it just pops right off the spinal column. The head doesn't fly away or anything, it's still held on by muscle, but the driver is just as dead. Worked at Inmes for a bit. Had a couple pass away from a 2-person plane crash. When the autopsy began it smelled a bit like burnt barbecue, and the people in the body bags weren't in your typical dead lying flat position. They were kind of stuck in a fetal position-ish. Open up the bag and I saw weird bumps on each of their heads. Asked the ME what was up with the bumps. I guess at high temps the brain expands and needs somewhere to go. At some point it just kinda pops out of the skull. So their brains were some inside some outside of skull. Then we try examining the body, and it looks like a cheap prop from a movie. I notice a wedding band on the female passenger and try my best to remove it. The whole finger comes off with it. Felt kinda bad. Then I spent 10 minutes trying to clean off what I can only imagine was human grease and burnt flesh off the ring so we could package it up and eventually return it to the family. Plane crashes are pretty crazy. Not me and not a forensic scientist, but my dad is a EMT. He went on a run about noses in an abandoned house that sounded like a person. It was just a cat going nuts. He said the house looked like it was from the Addams Family. When he went and he checked the house and found a mummy hung in the closet by a belt. He says there was a lot of gay porn mags laying around too, so it looked like autoerotic asphyxiation. He said there was no smell either, so the guy had been dead for a while. It turns out he died 3 years ago and his neighbors just thought he moved or was foreclosed on. TLDR. My dad once found a gay mummy in the closet at the Addams family house. I work in digital forensics. All the most WTF stuff has been pedo related. Not in how horrible they are, but in how illogical the suspect's sexual tastes were. Edit. Well, this spawned a lot of weird commentary. Not a forensic scientist, but one time I looked at an onion skin in class and found out it had cells. Commercial meat grinder. Love triangle gone bad. This rest of the story is in pieces. Retired undertaker here. Duck hunter in gear found dead on front porch. Looked like shotgun went off and hit him. Close range in the chest. Got him back to funeral home for autopsy. Small town. He had been stabbed about 30 times. I was called to perform an X-ray examination on a burn victim. The victim was significantly charred. Much of the body mass had been burned away, but large portions of the quadriceps and gluteals remained intact and exposed. When I walked into the morgue through an airlock, the smell was sweet and pleasing. It smelled distinctively like barbecue chicken, and for a brief moment, made me hungry. That single case bothered me more than having carrion beetles crawl off of a body and onto my face. I worked in a morgue for a while. Lots of weird things. One case in particular stands out. A man was found dead in a food truck. He looked pretty normal from the outside. After we took off his clothes, things started looking a bit odd. He was wearing women's underwear that had holes cut in them for his D. He probably had on around 20 pairs of the underwear. He also had a D pump on his D with a few condoms on. I don't remember what the cause of death was. Wonder what his family thought about it. Maybe not the most gruesome, but definitely one of the weirder things I saw. A friend of mine is a CSI, and I don't know if he's posted here, but just in case he hasn't, I'll put this here. Anchorage, Alaska, 2008. 27-year-old woman hasn't paid her rent in 4 months. The landlord gave her a bit of a reprieve because he knew she was very poor and she was in low-income housing. But after 4 months of zero contact, enough is enough and he calls the cops to get into her place and either see her to talk or change the locks and remove her stuff to a storage shed so the apartment can be released to someone else. The cops find the front door to be bolted and use the landlord's key to get in. Then find the woman dead in her shower, just sort of slumped as if she fell against the wall and slid down. The water wasn't on, and as this is AK in the winter, the water is never shut off by the city because if hot water isn't moving through the pipes they freeze and burst. The fact that her shower is off means she never turned it on, or someone turned it off. The body is taken to the morgue and autopsied at the family's request because no obvious means of death can be found. As far as the examination could conclude, she died from an adrenal surge causing her heart to stop, more commonly known as frightened to death, which yes, can actually happen in some rare cases. The body was old, but no test showed any residual drugs in her system. None were found in the apartment, nor was any sign of anyone having entered or left before the cops. The young pretty average health woman appears to have gotten into her shower, and then her heart stopped due to terror. As far as I know, that's where the story ends. No substantial leads. I regularly post on Unsolved Mysteries, so I thought his was fitting here. One of the best cases on Forensic Files was cold case that had gone unsolved for decades. A man told police he had picked up a hitchhiker in the evening. After the man and the hitchhiker got into a fight, the man threw him out of his car 2 miles away from his mother's house on a busy highway. The man later came home to his mother's house only to find the hitchhiker at his mother's house. He left to go call police from a payphone. This was before cell phones. The police found his mother dead in bed. The man was a beneficiary of a huge life insurance policy and was the prime suspect. The cops or anyone did not believe the man's story. It was inconceivable that the hitchhiker, who did not know where the mother's house was, could make a 2-mile journey with turns in a neighborhood to just randomly break in and kill the man's mother, who he didn't know. But there was blood at the scene and a palm print on the staircase that was not the man's nor the mother's. After some investigation, people at Hardee's did confirm that there was a man that fit the description looking to hitchhike. Still, they just assumed the man had paid the other man to kill his mother. 15 years later, after the invention of oddities, The DNA was matched to a career criminal who definitely matched the description of the hitchhiker. After bringing him in and interrogating him, the killer had no idea he had killed the mother of the man who gave him a ride. He simply walked through this neighborhood looking for a house that looked empty, and his mother's was the only one without the lights on. It's baffling. After completing my medical graduation, I was posted as a junior resident in the Department of Forensic Medicine. 40+ female who had suffered burn injury died due to overhydration with IV fluid. When her chest was opened, believe me, the smell hits your frontal cortex like no other smell. It was messy. Very, very messy. I had a professor who was an expert in osteology and would train radiologists and doctors to recognize defensive fractures in arm bones. Defending yourself from an attack can leave a very distinctive spiral fracture on your forearms. And in his years of research, he'd never encountered that specific fracture pattern anywhere except in a defensive wound, until he was attending a seminar at the University of Toronto in February, and when leaving the lecture, he was walking down an outdoor flight of stairs when someone called out to him to ask a question. He had his hands in his pockets because he wasn't wearing gloves, turned, slipped and fell while perpendicular to the steps. His forearm hit the step and resulted in the exact spiral fracture he'd never seen anywhere else. And best part is that the radiologist that examined him was someone he himself had trained to look for this sort of fracture as a warning sign for domestic violence. A friend's wife does forensics field work for a sparsely populated area and had said that only one case has been noteworthy. She was asked to analyze a crime scene in a house used to manufacture meth. She surveyed the outside and then proceeded with an officer to the kitchen where the basement door was located. In the basement they found a metal door bolted shut and they decided to call for bolt cutters to enter. They didn't have them at the time, so she kept examining the area and found a side door to THR room behind a furnace. The lock was jimmied open and they found a sawn-off 12-gauge shotgun had been pointed at the bolted door. The gun was loaded and the tripwire still attached to the shotgun. She described it as the most chilling experience of her career. I'm a specialty forensics investigator that focuses on fire and explosions. Somehow, a lady with a coffee can of gas, her husband's asphalt-covered work clothes, and a front-load dryer managed to turn the dryer into a rocket ship that launched through a plate glass window and 10 feet into the road. We have no known models that can demonstrate how the available materials were able to launch the dryer. I was at a regional medical center in rural Guatemala when we had a case come in from an OTA, road traffic accident, involving a pedestrian and a chicken bus. For those of you who don't know, a popular, but incredibly dangerous, form of public transport are retired American school buses that have been painted all sorts of vibrant colors, but underneath the mechanics are shot to it. Anyway, this pedestrian had been hit by one of these rolling death traps which was fully loaded going around 80 miles per hour and ended up getting wrapped under the front right wheel arch and completely mangled beyond recognition. They found bits of this guy spread 2 kilometers down the road as the initial impact had split his torso down the middle and basically turned him inside out. When all the bits had been collected, the height of the body bag was around 2 inches, so you imagine the state of the remains. Passers-by helped us pick up bits from the side of the road, but dogs and cats ran off with a fair amount of the smaller bits. Guatemala is a cool place. Made an account and quit lurking just for this thread. Crime scene tech here. This one stands out as I was still training at the time. Suicide by gunshot. Guy went to an indoor range and rented a monster of a revolver. A judge if I Ike. This thing could shoot 410 shot shells. The force basically blew the top of his head off. What remained of the skin from the top of his head was flapped into the skull cavity and his eyes looked like they were bulging out. Blood and brains up to 10 feet away. Found his safety goggles about 10 yards downrange. The scariest part was he was watching others shoot beforehand. Sometimes I wonder if he planned to take others with him. Late to the party but saddest case was 2 brothers out hunting. The older one, 14, shot the younger one, 12, accidentally when he saw deer. He hit his brother square in the back of the head, which leaves quite the exit wound on the other side. Yes, he did flip him over and see what he did. Feel bad for the kid. Most WTF. Crackhead on her period with a week-old pad. Yes, she used the same one for a week. Threw it at a cell. Good. I got to take pictures of the pad. Was pretty gross, but at least I didn't get hit by the pad. It was a long time ago, retired now. My ME unit investigated overflow cases, basically cases that the main unit wouldn't need to waste resources on. Came down to us. We would get things like accidents and suicides, open and shut. Sometimes we got more intense cases. The one that stuck. It was the first time they actually warned me before opening the body bag. The death was reported as an accident. He fell from the balcony of his apartment on the 12th floor into the tree beside the building, hitting every branch on the way down. Turn out his mother pushed him. The result was a grotesque mess. Stepfather used to be a police officer and loves telling stories about crime scenes. He went on to tell us about how after a motorcycle rider was struck by a train, he went under the wheels. His torso was found about 30 feet from his legs. They were connected by an intestine. So he picked up one end of the intestine and started to wrap it up like a rope. Not me, but there was a great case that I can't currently find on Google. I hope it was true. A woman was found dead in her bed with blood everywhere. And I mean everywhere. There were wine glasses, or drinking glasses, throughout the house with blood in them. I think blood may have been smeared about as well. So the investigators assume some bizarre ritual. A gang of people. The whole 9 yards. Long story short, she had some strange clotting problem and was bleeding out of her mouth for an extended period of time. She probably got hazy from the loss of blood and was just trying to not make a mess in her house, so she kept spitting the blood in glasses. Eventually she was overcome and died in her bed. Edit. I only hope it was true, BC. I don't want to propagate lies. Forensic genetic in Mexico. I've seen some serious it. I was assigned to the identification of mass graves. Over 300 bodies. Dismembered. Scattered and burned. It was just one site. We had many. The coolest forensic story I heard was in a forensic math seminar a few years back. This case was, I think, used as inspiration for an episode of Bones. A guy killed his daughter but didn't report her missing until 8 or 9 months later. When they did find her remains, they were able to prove that she had died months before. The father claimed that he last saw her because there was a wasp nest in her skull. That particular breed of wasp only builds nests in dry places, so she had to have already been decomposed prior to their nest building season. Not me, but someone I worked with at a pharmaceutical laboratory left to become a forensic scientist. One of the first cases was a man who repeatedly broke into a farm and had sexual relations with the livestock. When he was caught and went to trial, he would only admit to having relations with the female animals even though there was evidence for interfering with both genders. Apparently he was quite aggressive about denying the male victims, always amused that he presumably didn't want his reputation amongst other animal molesters being ruined. I once asked a paramedic his absolute worst job story. There was a vehicular accident he attended. An absolutely immense woman driving a Ford Pinto slammed into a cattle truck carrying calves. Before he got on scene, some person, S, who had arrived before, realizing this was primo veal, went nuts picking it up for their use. The huge woman had literally, not figuratively, exploded at impact. After they had spent a rather lengthy time gathering this lady up in pieces, there was one rib section they never found. Woman told me she would mail us a discreet sample for her paternity test. FedExes us a huge couch cushion with the tiniest cum stain on it ever. There's a crime scene photo somewhere of a man who committed suicide by putting himself through a bandsaw. He rigged it up specifically for the purpose. It was on the old Ogrish site, before it became Liver Lake. I'm still active on Ogrish forums, so I may be able to dig it up. I did an internship at a PD one year. I got to be with the forensic team for a week. I got to see the aftermath of what a stabbing looks like. A 113 stab wound aftermath. Yes, 113 is correct. Unreal amounts of blood. Used a kitchen knife. Upon first inspection it appeared like a dozen because there was so much blood on the body they couldn't tell how many there actually was. Gruesome. A while ago on Reddit I saw a post where a guy had built a shotgun helmet to ensure that he died. I was a forensic scientist for over 30 years. During that time I have worked on just about every kind of bizarre atrocity that you can imagine. Rape, murder, incest, torture, cannibalism. I'm sure the details would either gross you out or excite you, or both. The thing is that at the end of the day, when I look back on these thousands of cases, the only feeling I have is the sense of tragedy and loss. This is especially true of the victims and their families, but also, to some extent, of perpetrators and their families as well. The frustrating thing about forensic science is that you are always reacting to a crime that has been committed. You don't prevent anything and you don't save anybody. The most that you can say is that you help in bringing about closure for all concerned, or perhaps curtailed the activity of a serial criminal. I have found that as the years have passed and I reflect on my career, the memories of the gory details fade and have been replaced with compassion, empathy and respect for those people whose lives were tragically altered.